Good day, everyone. My name is John Galbraith, and I am responsible for the overall delivery of advisory services and the one-to-one experiences at TechAlliance. And I am delighted to be hosting today's Fireside Chat, Molding Your Manufacturing Master Plan. As the Regional Innovation Center for Southwestern Ontario, TechAlliance empowers world-class ventures and fuels growth in Canada's innovation economy. We champion and coach entrepreneurs, amplify and impact businesses, and contribute to a bold technology community across Southwestern Ontario. This is our vision. We are the place for dreamers, innovators, and world-changing ideas. In pursuit of creating impact in spaces where innovation thrives, we must act, be bold, and lift others as we rise. We strive to do that while keeping it real in all that we do. To be put simply, we support your ideas and your ventures at every step of the entrepreneurial journey. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. A few things before we get started. All participants are muted. Sit back, relax, enjoy. Today's chat will be recorded and available afterwards on our YouTube channel. This is evergreen content that we expect to help many entrepreneurs in the weeks and months and years to come. I encourage you to add any of your questions for our guests at the Q&A, only to enrich this this content and this conversation that we're having. And if you would like to keep up with everything there is to know about Southwestern Ontario's innovation economy, sign up for our weekly newsletter, and we'll drop that link in the chat. Working with entrepreneurs and being one myself, I'm acutely aware that after the aha moments, we're encountered with many of the, both exciting and sometimes daunting details of how the heck we're going to make it all happen. What's your next step after you have your clear vision? Have you researched the industry, and are you ready to get things going and put it all together? Well, as you can imagine, the possibilities are endless, as are the roadblocks. And in this chat, we will hear from three founders who have previously or are currently immersed in the arena of manufacturing and know firsthand how to take a product to market. From all natural automated disinfecting solutions and Canadian-made PPE to industrial design engineering, fabrication, and manufacturing, today's chat brings together decades of experience across varying fields within the manufacturing sector. Let's hear from their lived experiences. And here's a bit about today's guests. Mike Banovsky, the president of MPB Industrial Ltd and an entrepreneur in residence at TechAlliance and a good buddy of mine. Mike's an innovative entrepreneur with deep roots domestically and internationally in design engineering and manufacturing of industrial products and services for industries such as oil and gas, renewable energy, and water treatment. From the great part of Ontario, Sarnia Lambton. Mike, welcome. Good to see you today. Carmina Young is the founder and CEO of Carmina de Young Fashion Design, Inc. She is a graduate of Fanshawe College's fashion design program and has led a team designing and producing her own sustainable women's brand while manufacturing garments and soft goods for other Canadian companies. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the company shifted 100% of its production capacity to her newest initiatives, CYHealth and Life Cycle PPE, making isolation gowns and other PPE, creating self-sustaining supply chain for PPE within Canada. Welcome, Carmina. Good to see you as well. And Jenessa Olsen is one of two co-founders of In the ClearZone. Jenessa uses simple strategy coupled with a passion for problem solving and a heart for justice to fuel disruptive thinking. Launched during the COVID-19 pandemic, In the ClearZone patented 100% natural disinfecting solution for equipment and other commercial applications, offering environmentally and economically sustainable way for businesses to stay open and work while protecting the future. We have the great fortune, hello Jenessa, good to have you here. We have the great fortune of having worked with all three of these community and business leaders and are excited for you to hear their stories. Welcome, Mike, Carmina, Jenessa, thanks again for joining me. So now that you know a little bit who we're chatting with today, we're just going to dive right in and get started right at the very beginning. We're going to start with you, Mr. Banovsky. With decades of expertise in design engineering and industrial products, how would you advise those who have a fabulous, viable idea but they're new to the world of manufacturing. Where do we get started to determine, where do we get started to determine where do we get started? What's the manufacturing process, and what should their list include? Mike, maybe talk a bit about that.
Sure. You said let's get started. So yeah, you have to get started. So manufacturing startups are complicated. They're challenging and they're costly. My opinion is you need to test the market at the right off the bat. Is your product is it something that people and companies will buy? Hopefully. Does the product have a long life cycle potential, or does it meet a current need that may fizzle out? Each requires a different approach. If it's a short cycle, you don't want to get into a heavy buying buildings and all the rest of it. So each one takes a different approach. So at the very beginning, you need to take the time to evaluate each step, to plan and evaluate. Don't be concerned if you have to change and scrap some of your plans to start over to get it right. It's always easier and cheaper to make the change on the paper versus the shop floor. You should identify the key resources that are needed: engineering services, equipment required, certifications, processes, materials, suppliers, facilities, qualified manpower, and don't forget funding. It will not be cheap. Dig deep to understand your own role in the big picture. Are you a paper pusher? Are you a fabrication expert? Are you a salesperson or a designer? You can't do it all. It's usually best to utilize the strengths that you have where needed and hire or contract resources that you need. If you're by the way, if you're a shop person, it doesn't hurt to take an accounting course along the way. It's good to learn everything you can about all aspects of the business. You have to build a strong, resourceful team, and that takes time. And at the very end, don't forget to have some fun with your team. People work best when they are appreciated and suitably rewarded for their efforts. That's how you get things done.
Really love that feedback, Mike. I think we're well aligned when it comes to kind of, having fun, obviously. And I think the, that the people, it's all part of a team effort. So I really appreciate that. Jenessa, I know you've had a journey with kind of, your IP and some of the property that you've developed that in the ClearZone. So maybe you could, just enlighten us about some of the major regulatory roadblocks that you've had to learn to maneuver in your business, first of all, and then second of all, does having IP make them more difficult to overcome? And I'll let you answer that, and then I've got a follow-up.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so when it comes to regulatory standards and certifications, the way that we started is we just Googled where our product belongs. So understanding like who your product is made for. Is it for businesses? Is it for end consumers? They're going to have completely different regulations that are surrounding them. So understanding who you're targeting, where your product fits, is going to be the first place where you can figure out how then to regulate it. Google is an amazing source, but one of the things that we did is we started working with a contract manufacturing company to help us out, and we got a consultant. And it was just someone with lots of experience in this space, and they kind of laid down for us all of the different regulations that we were going to need to consider. About a year ago, like I had no idea what CSA was, the Canadian standards. I had no clue about those electrical standards. I didn't know that they existed, but thankfully we had somebody who did know that they existed and was able to tell us, this is something that you need to look into before you even get into the stage of really designing your product. You need to thoroughly understand what category your product is going to fall under, read and understand those standards, and then design to those specs, because quite frankly, if you get going without understanding your standards, you're going to do a lot of designing and redesigning. And like Mike said, it's very expensive. So you want to just set yourself out going down the right path when you get started. As far as IP and regulations go, yes, it does make it more challenging when you're kind of competing in a new space that maybe doesn't have regulations for your specific product, or other products in the market aren't really like your product. So again, understanding where your product falls and any standards. Our product actually falls under a couple different standards. So we needed to make sure we designed to all of those standards, and then really just communicate what our product does, prove out how it works. Honestly, reaching out to those regulatory bodies helps a lot because often they will just tell you. So you can do a lot of guesswork, but the best thing to do is just ask the people who are experts and get them to tell you, because they will tell you where to go.
That's amazing. I think you've echoed a kind of a lot of what Mike said about the importance of, understand what you don't know and where your gaps are, and kind of, search out for those resources. So other than Google and maybe having a subject matter expert, is there kind of one source of truth, or is it largely kind of agnostic to the entrepreneur and your specific initiative?
I would say that it's very different for each business venture. So our product, for instance, is in the space of sanitization and disinfection. So obviously we're going to look to Health Canada. We're going to look at the standards that are out there from the FBA, EPA, CSA, all of those different groups. But anything that has any electrical components is definitely going to be CSA in Canada and UL. So you can always start there and try to figure out where you belong. There's lots of different classifications. If you have electrical components in your product, you need. So I guess that would be like a base level, and then it would probably be a little bit more industry specific from there.
Cool. It's interesting. We've only been talking for about 10 minutes and we're already starting to kind of see that, kind of there's a lot more of the same, I think, than there is different, even though, making a product is extremely different. So Carmina, CYHealth and Lifecycle PPE are just prime examples of pivoting based on market demand. Could you maybe enlighten us a little bit, or talk about that, like the pivot, and what were some of the largest challenges posed by moving from fashion to PPE?
Yes, so we had a lot of experience in actually design development and product development and manufacturing women's clothing. When we pivoted to making PPE gowns, it was just one single design. The challenges were very, very different. There was not so much time into making the garment, ensuring that the fit was good. It was mostly in the risk level of the gowns. We need to have to pass the AME standards. We need to also obtain an MPB license, which allow us to make and sell the product. It was an unknown industry. We had to do a lot of different samples, try different seams, different equipment. We didn't have some of the equipment that was needed to make the gowns, so we needed to bring resources, find funding, and bring resources to buy the right equipment. After having the right equipment, it was also the challenge to how we sell our product, where do we place it. There was a lot of competition and product selling at a very economic pricing, product coming from overseas. So we had to face those challenges. Initially, we started making reusable gowns, and then the demand for reusable gowns stopped, and we had to move it to make it disposable gowns. We didn't like the idea of making disposable gowns because we are a company that is very aware of environment, and for that reason, we wanted to continue to make the reusables, but we had just to start making disposables. And we're making the number of units that we're making now with this new product, it's big. So the staff needed, it was 5-6 times more than what it was and the size of our company when we were making women's clothing. So we went from like 5 to 8 staff to over 60 members. And with that, we needed HR resources. We needed training. A lot of the people we were hiring also people who face barriers of language. So it was definitely a lot of challenges there. But where we are now, we're feeling very confident and very that we have now overcome some of those challenges. We're becoming more, we have more experience in making the gown. We are confident about the quality of our product, and we're confident about our training programs that we have created because of those challenges.
So Carmina, and so in manufacturing, we always talk about mix and volume, right? So
Yes.
in pivoting, you were able to kind of lower the mix, and did that help kind of, obviously you've scaled your operation, but did that help you guys achieve the higher volume and meeting the higher orders?
Well, the demand is for even higher volumes. We can only do a certain percentage of what we are asked to do, because the skill that is needed to make the gowns is not here. So we resource to bring in people with no skills, with training, but the process for them to get to the place where they are producing high numbers is very slow. So right now, our current client is, they are asking us for bigger numbers, more capacity, but we're slowly ramping up and trying just to ask them, just we're getting there, and we'll see how it goes.
That's amazing, and it's barely been a little over a year, and look at how far you've come, and they're already
Yes,
saying
it's
give us
very
more, more,
different.
more.
It's very different, but we're very proud, and we are able to provide jobs for people in London. So it's very good.
Kudos, Carmina, and congratulations. Jenessa, I'm going to be a little bit selfish here because I want some feedback.
Right.
TechAlliance, we've been lucky enough to work with you and in the ClearZone since its inception. And I often ponder, what could we, as the Regional Innovation Center, as an ecosystem, how can we better, support early stage entrepreneurs in manufacturing?
Yeah, great question. So when we, I guess, found ourselves getting into manufacturing, we knew literally nothing about the space at all. We learned everything from the ground up, both from experience and from speaking to other people, researching those sorts of things. So like I said, I didn't know what CSA was. I didn't know really anything about electrical and choosing volts for fans and timelines for tooling. I didn't even know what tooling was. There are all of these things that are associated and very field specific when it comes to manufacturing, that if you have never had exposure in that space, often you just think like, oh, I can draw something on a piece of paper and then we can make it. But it's not that simple at all. Even when it comes to supply chain, it's just very challenging to understand where to find suppliers, how to find them, how to know what is a good component for your product, all of these different things. And it gets very complicated and can get very time consuming if you really don't know what you're doing, which was our case when we first got going with this. So I was thinking about, how we could have been better supported, or how entrepreneurs could be better supported. And I think almost just like a meeting of the minds at the outset would have been incredibly helpful. So somebody who knows about manufacturing, like physical products, timelines, somebody who's an expert in supply chain, somebody who maybe is a topic expert on whatever your kind of key market is. Just bringing all of those people together to even understand, what the financial requirements are up front. How do you know if you're even getting a good price? How do you know if you're picking a good industry partner? To just give you the full lowdown on what you should expect, in 1 month, in 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, what reasonable timelines are, all of those sorts of things would have been super helpful, because, like most startups do, we made mistakes in the outset because we were learning, this whole thing for the first time. And, we thought that something was a reasonable timeline that was not, or we tried to do something to go fast that actually ended up lengthening the whole process. But had we had a better, I guess, roadmap of what to expect, where to go, how to set all this stuff up in a very structured way, we would have been able to make more informed decisions. So I just always think the greatest thing to ask for out of the gate is help. And we could have asked for so much more help. And that would have just been, I think, a great way to kick off the business.
Mhm. I really like that in terms of, because I agree with you as an entrepreneur who's now kind of working amongst the regional innovation centers and happy to do so. I often find, like, and looking back on my journey, and maybe you share this, it's not the pieces of paper that you read, but it's often those connections that you made that kind of really helped you either develop your understanding and move the needle, or really move that along. So
Yeah. Well, and I think also, like, as an entrepreneur, you have to have like a level of confidence, right? So you obviously think like, oh, I'm going into this, I can figure out anything. And sometimes when you read something, you're like, oh, no big deal, I can figure that out. But if you actually have somebody tell you, sometimes it's a little bit different and it hits a little different. So yeah, I sometimes I just always think like getting an actual expert to tell you things is it's gonna hit different than just reading it.
Sure. For sure. That's great. And thank you for that, Jenessa. Carmina, one area that can feel like a needle in a very large haystack is accessing, as Jenessa mentioned, accessing supply chains. And you said that you maybe had some, overcame those barriers during your pivot and through your journey. So what goes into that, and what advice would you have for founders regarding sourcing and managing their supply chain?
Yes, so we definitely spend a lot of time in trying to figure out, first of all, where to find the right supplies. We were very familiar with the supplies for fashion, and that helped us a little when we were making reusable. But when we were starting to make the disposable gowns, it was completely a different thing. So we reached out to innovation centers. We reached out to um, uh, the government institutions. We reached out to the Trade Commissioner. We reached out to the Canadian Federation of Payroll. We did a lot of online sourcing, and we connected with people that we know in the industry. Some of our partners we call what we will call competitors. We try to work, on a collaboration with them, trying to figure out how to bring more information. For our particular product, so the raw material used is polypropylene. Polypropylene textile is used to make installation gowns. Polypropylene there's no Canadian manufacturers. Everything is coming from overseas. It's been a difficult journey for us. Up till today, we still face that challenge. We found people who are bringing our wholesalers. Through them, we have requested samples and we have requested prices. However, their quality, the quality of those products coming from overseas is not meeting the Canadian standards. And we have also a company in the US. They actually recycled some of the materials from the huge healthcare companies. Hyler is one of them, for example. And we buy some of those materials. 70% of each roll that we buy, it's in good condition. 30% is waste, but it's a way for us to recycle materials, to find very high quality materials. The answer is look at the different resources that they are available for you. Call them, and they will give you more resources as you start digging into how to find those suppliers.
For sure. And I think one thing you mentioned earlier on in the talk is that you've also, as an organization, you've established some core values about sustainability and maybe, recycling and environmental consciousness. So that has to play into your supply chain decisions too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're always looking for people who have the same values than us. And once we found a supplier that fits with those values, then we try to establish a long-term relationship. We also applied for Engine to help us with our bringing collecting the materials, bringing a new program to Canada. So we created a life cycle program, and the life cycle health is also a division of Carmina de Young. We are going to be making our own textile, which is going to be 100% recyclable product. So we will collect materials from the gowns that were used in the hospitals, and then we will collect them. They will be sent to a processing company in Brampton, and they will convert all of those materials into pallets, plastic pallets, and then we will be making the textile right here in London, Ontario. We're in the process of we're still trying to bring the right equipment to London, and there is a lot of engineering behind this project. But we're very excited that we're going to be the first ones making this product here in Canada.
Outstanding, and our community will benefit from it. And thank you for your dedication to that, Carmina. Thank you so much. That's amazing news that I didn't know. So now I know. Unreal. Mike, being in the business of advising and supporting entrepreneurs who are entering manufacturing, we talked about, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So where do you, because you've been around the block, so where do you see the biggest knowledge gap with young entrepreneurs going after a manufacturing business, and where have you been steering them to fill those gaps?
Interesting question, because there's a few, but probably the main gap I see as the manufacturing, the skills gap. Aging, workers, reduced workforce. It's hard to entice younger workers into the manufacturing careers, just like the trades. I think there's a shift happening. And I think the new technologies introduced into manufacturing makes it, I guess, more sexy. People, they can do more programming and all that kind of stuff. It's not just nails and hammers and all that kind of jazz. Lean manufacturing is arriving, and that demands all new skill sets. Workers need to think critically about their process to improve operations, efficiencies. They're all part of the team to make things better and more efficient, etc. So where can you go to get help? I find the local colleges. I'm located in Sarnia, and we have Lambton College here, and they have tremendous training programs, welding and all different things. There's apprentice programs, and it depends if it's unionized or whatnot. You have to make sure you go through the right apprentice programs to be able to be employed at the end. So, and also there's equipment specific training. So if you have a specialized piece of equipment on the floor, you need to have training for that piece of equipment. And in most cases, the manufacturer will supply that. But you have to keep up with all the new changes, and you can't produce something if you don't have people to actually make it. So I think that's one of my the main areas that I would like to mention.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting thought, Mike, and I would agree that I think we're the amount of innovation that is in manufacturing right now is kind of making it sexy and really a tech-enabled industry, and you're going to need to be able to walk that walk and talk that talk to be able to be gainfully employed in the industry as well. Another point that you made, Mike, which I always say is sometimes the best thing an early stage entrepreneur can do is go get work experience, go work at a manufacturer, go kind of understand, and you'll see maybe how to do it better. And I think, Jenessa, you're still the outlier that we're trying to figure out how you did it. But we'll crack into those secrets as we go. I got a couple questions in the Q&A that I wanted to pose, and maybe just give you each an opportunity if you want, or simply feel free to pass. But what are the monumental differences in working with a Canadian manufacturing plant versus an overseas when your design is Canadian approved? Mike, why don't we let you maybe start to have a crack at that if you have some thoughts or opinions here.
Sure. In my case, I was the Canadian manufacturer for an overseas, the product went overseas. So I was dealing with a company, one of the companies, LG Engineering in Seoul, Korea. So we had, we manufactured pressure vessels, heat exchangers, reactors, etc. And here in Sarnia, and we had to design to certain codes that had to be adhered to in Thailand, for example, or global. So we happen to have a code, it's called ASME code that is kind of it's accepted worldwide for this, the type of product. So everybody plays the same rules. So it doesn't matter if it's manufactured in China or in Canada or United States. So the rules were already made, so we just followed those rules. But dealing with our customer, our actual purchaser was in Korea. We had to deal with the language thing, the timing. We used to communicate by fax at that time and phone call, but because of the time difference, it was a challenge. So sometimes you'd send a fax and you'd get the reply like the next morning when you came in, and like it was kind of interesting, but you have to deal with that. So, but back to the original question, if it really depends on the product that you're getting. So like in my case, it was the pressure vessel, so we had the one code, so it really didn't matter. But if you had another code that, you know, say in India, and we would have to have it delivered here, you have to be very careful. So I don't know if I really answered your question.
Yeah,
but
I think we're just looking for opinions and insight here, Mike. And
I could talk about it for half an hour, really, with all the different things that I went through. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. So.
Carmina, you have Canadian designs, and so do you have any lived experience around this question? And I'm happy to repeat it if you wanted to too.
Yeah, so well, I mean, there is a difference between Canadian products and products from overseas or other countries. I think that Canadian manufacturers, they have very high standards. So if someone is buying product from Canadians, I feel like people will always feel secure that they are having very high quality products. On the other side, if you're trying to purchase products that are coming from other countries, like in our case right now, we're trying to purchase the textile equipment from China. So different components of the equipment are going to be bought here in Canada, so then we can meet the standards when we're making our products. So that's how we're tackling that Canadian quality.
Cool. Jenessa, anything to add here?
Yeah, I would just add to make sure you know who your customer is before you make a decision like that, because there are some companies, government bodies, those sorts of things that will need to buy products. If it's a Canadian government deal that you're trying to do, they want, you know, a certain percentage or whatever of their product to be made in Canada. I know, for instance, if you're trying to do like business with the US military, they want you to be an American company with manufacturing in America. So you don't want to accidentally like shoot yourself in the foot by not looking into what your customer wants from you. Because then it doesn't matter if the manufacturing is cheaper or faster or anything like that, if you can't sell to the person that you're trying to sell to.
Yeah, really good about like the paradigm of work back from the customer instead of working back from maybe the balance sheet or the bill of materials or whatever, right? That's pretty profound. Good, thanks, Jenessa. Another question here, and we'll go the opposite way. Based on your experience, what's the ideal lead time to move product from design to the manufacturing process? Is that too fuzzy?
Okay, Are we starting with me?
Yeah. We're starting with you.
All right. So as far as ideal lead time, I would say, first of all, that's going to be extremely specific to your product. If it is a complex product, give yourself time. Also, I think that like if you're working with a contract manufacturer, you're manufacturing yourself, you will be able to understand how long it takes to build a product if you do it yourself. So when we first started manufacturing, I literally was like on the manufacturing floor making these products for weeks. And I got a very good understanding of how long it takes to actually, once the design is done, to build these products, test them, get all your branding on them, all your labels, and get them out the door. And it was a really good experience for me because it's easy to create a timeline based on something you know nothing about. And you're just like, oh, you know what? 6 weeks. That sounds great because I want to get these out in 6 weeks. But if you really haven't had the experience, it's an arbitrary number. So I would say go build one of your products yourself and then build your timeline reasonably around that.
Sounds a lot like software development where we just pull out like, we can build it, it'll be ready next week or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Carmina, what about you? Do you you've moved your PPE from design into manufacturing?
Yes. So, I mean, in the case of women's clothing, I would say sell your product, then make it. Because we designed seasonal collections and it was very, very challenging to sell. We have invested all these, in people, resources, in materials and design development. We have the product, we have the marketing materials, and then it was really difficult to sell it. In the case of PPE, for instance, I feel like it's still the same thing. We have designs that you can go from 1 week. So you have the design development is very fast right now. I have a lot of experience. And so we can say today, well, let's make a product. But I say, I think my advice to any entrepreneur is like, sell your product, think about the idea, sell it, and then manufacture it. Making samples, depending on the type of product. So for women's fashion, it will be about 2 months from design development to making samples, and then the production will be depending on who you're selling to. Currently, our customer, we make the sales and the design development is already done, and it takes us about a week to design a product and make a sample, and make a few more samples and distribute them, and then we'll just wait for the sales, basically.
That's cool. Cool. Interesting product kind of life cycle there. Mike, you not flux capacitors, heat exchangers are what you guys are building. I
can't build them
from Back to the Future, but how long did you guys take?
We've had projects that you go through a bidding process with people all around the world. So that process alone might take a month. And then if you get the order, then it depends on the size of the project, but it's usually a year by the time you see it going out the door of your shop. And some of these pieces of equipment were 400 tons. So not small, very large things that boats will come into the port of Sarnia, and big cranes will lift it up and put it onto the ship, and away it goes to China or somewhere. And so the process is long. So, but sometimes we used to have emergency breakdowns in the plants, and some piece of equipment would fail. So all of a sudden, the broken piece would come to our shop, and we would have to turn it around in a matter of 24 hours or less. So we'd have to procure materials, get the manpower, pull the unit apart, fix it where it's supposed to be fixed, get it tested, get it certified by the ministry so it's safe, etc. So, but doing that, we had to move very quickly, and our type of work was custom, and it wasn't like making sausages one after another and shipping them up. You know, every job was different. It was custom. So that's a different thing than just selling the same things over and over and over. So you always have to
mix.
You have to, every part, every piece, it has to be, you have to have a drawing there. You have to know what you're doing. You have to design it. And so you have to really move quickly. So.
Interesting. Yeah. So the spectrum of mix versus volume that you're doing is, you know, and, you know, obviously big, costly, slow mistakes and whatnot. Lyle Hutchison has a question right for you, Carmina. Did you have to get MDEL, medical device establishment license yourself, or did you have to do that first of all? And the follow-up would be, did you do it yourself or use a consultant?
We did it ourselves. We do have a license. Yes. And we did it ourselves. I don't remember the process, but it's my business partner who did the process.
Cool. So you've proven that it is doable yourself. Yes. Maybe that's the better question.
Exactly, yes. We could not make and sell the product if we didn't have the license. And then after the license, so every product we make, we also have to test for a new product before we put it into the market. We have to get a certification for that product, depending on the level that we're of the product that we're selling.
Awesome. Great. Well, I'm just doing a quick time check here, and I'm going to move on to kind of just a last thing. We'll kind of get wrapping this up, you guys. And again, I really appreciate the time, but I wanted to go around the horn once more and just try to leave a few tidbits for entrepreneurs that still might be like, you know, I've still kind of got to get started. I've drank from a fire hose for 45 minutes. What can we leave these folks with? So, just maybe some resources or anything that you guys would advise. It's just good starting points or something that's helped you along your journey. Jenessa, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, great. So I would say that if you're thinking about getting into this field, like I was saying previously, make the product yourself. Like, do some research. When you're trying to go from that design to manufacturing, or you think you have an idea, figure out what is in the market, how it's selling, who you're selling to, how long you think it should take, and how much you think it should cost. Like, really try to give yourself a decent picture of what's ahead, and then go do it yourself. Like, I would go, and when this, well, I mean, we're allowed to do this again, but there was a time where we weren't allowed to go walk around hardware stores, but I would literally just go walk around a hardware store, and I had this idea in my head of how we wanted our product to be made. And I would look at everything down the aisles and say, like, will this help me build my product? Will this help me build my product? And that's how we really figured out a lot of the manufacturing. And then when we went into a manufacturer to start getting it done, we had a working prototype to show to them, which expedited the process and gave us a great understanding of how the whole manufacturing process would go. So I would say, like, get your hands dirty. Don't put it off. Do it today, and make sure you're talking to your customers and see how they want your product to work as well.
Awesome. Carmina?
I mean, I'm on the same page. Everything that I have learned in the business is because I have done it. And any processes in line, I'm still working on the line now, because as I'm trying to implement more efficiencies, new systems, our whole team is working in implementing systems and bringing new systems. But at the same time, the experience that I have in making the product, doing the sourcing, just making the product myself, trying to figure out the different, how can I make one step easier? And then when I'm making it, I'm thinking about when I'm producing it in numbers. And so that is helping me a lot now with the stuff that we have. and saying, well, no, we need to save some time here. We need to make this better. We need to make the flow better. Yeah, that's my advice. We are bringing other resources as well. So we brought some lean manufacturing consulting, lean manufacturing consulting firm to help us. However, there is so much another organization can do for you. You have to do it, learn it, find systems, find ways, implement them. Yes.
That's great. Mike, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I found dealing with different entrepreneurs in the past and my experience, entrepreneurs usually know about the product that they have. They're smart about it. There's some cases that other people get into businesses that maybe don't know anything about it, and they just get into it because of the market, which is fine. But most people, they know how to design a table or whatever, and that's what they're making. But the biggest problem is trying to find someone to purchase or buy it. So they have a real issue with going out and finding buyers. They figure, I have the best table, so people come to me. Well, that it doesn't work that way. You need to be able to knock on doors. Don't be shy. Go and look further, know your market, and go after it. And if you can't get a sale, you're going to be closed very quickly. You won't even be open. So.
I can't echo that one enough, Mike. And for the folks that are still on, we crowdsourced some resources from our panel today. We've dropped them in the chat, some links to maybe help you on a self-guided journey a little bit more. Us with our startup advisors and our team, I know there's some questions in the Q&A that we couldn't get to. I'd highly encourage folks, reach out to our startup advisors, connect with folks like Mike. We're happy to answer these questions. We're happy to support you down this journey. And those are the things that we venture to do, and the value that we really believe we add at TechAlliance and as a regional innovation center for Southwestern Ontario. Many thanks to our panelists today, Jenessa, Carmina, Mike. I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day, a great weekend, and great. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.